Right, let's turn our focus to this now. Minister Angie Motshekga of Basic Education revealed that over 90,000 schoolgirls between the ages of 10 and 19 fell pregnant in 2021. This came out last week in a written response to Parliament's Portfolio Committee on Basic Education. KwaZulu-Natal had the highest number of schoolgirl pregnancies, followed by Gauteng, the Eastern Cape and Mpumalanga. This is despite the basic education pregnancy policy introduced in December 2021, through which schools are compelled to submit a police report if a girl under the age of 16 fell pregnant. For instance, Limpopo had 11,287 pregnancies and only 4,314 cases were reported, which possibly included rapes, sexual assault, attempted rape and contact sexual offences. Joining us now to look at the policy enforcement, George Moroasui, Legal and Ethics Manager at the South African Council of Educators, and Limpopo Education Head of Department, Onica Dederen. Good evening, and thank you very much for your time and for joining us tonight up here on In Focus. Onica, let me begin with you. As far as what is in place, right, in terms of, one, the protocol for management and reporting of sexual abuse and harassment in schools, but also the policy on the management and the reduction of learner pregnancies that is in place. When you look at those numbers at a glance, would you say we are failing in our stated intended goal of reducing and managing the incidence of unintended pregnancies in schools?
Well, thank you very much. Let me start by saying that, let me start with a disclaimer that the information that we report on is the information that we get from the Department of Health, that is in terms of the statistics. But I want to indicate that we do think that the policies that are put in place are actually reducing the number of teenage pregnancies in our provinces. So it means that these policies, because the policies also assist learners to come back to school and continue with their classes, it means that we as the department are actually making it a point that we support our learners, and also make it a point that we have programs in place that assist them in terms of preventing teenage pregnancy, but as well as making sure that if by any chance they become pregnant, they are not actually stigmatized or left in the lurch. Yeah. They are supported by ourselves when they come back to school. Now, let me just indicate that this policy, which was actually promulgated in 2021, it's actually it has become, it's going to be in full force in 2022 in terms of managing teenage pregnancy. So we really do think that the policies that we have in place are assisting the department in making sure that we reduce the number of teenage pregnancies in our schools.
Let's look then at what you are looking at in terms of your numbers from the Department of Health. Where are you seeing the reduction?
Well, in terms of Limpopo province, I just want to indicate that with regard to the numbers that come from the Department of Health, I must say that I'm not very sure if these numbers only talk to learners in Limpopo province, because they are talking about teenage pregnancies. It could be even those teenagers that are not in class. So I just want to start there. And if you look at our SASMs in the province, it differs from the statistics that comes from the Department of Health. Remember, in schools, when the learners are pregnant, the schools are expected to report pregnancies in our system, which is the SASEMS. Now, in terms of the SASEMS, we have realized that from 2014 to date, in terms of the system in our schools, we only have 3,882 learners that fell pregnant. So, but if you look at the statistics from health, it's much more than what we get ourselves from our schools, which means that it may be that we are actually talking to learners that are not even in our schools, because remember, if we say we normally look at 10 to 19 years old, you find that some of these 19 years old are not in our public schools, but they are, some of them may be at university.
Yeah.
So,
this particular report was given by the Minister of Basic Education, and it pertains to learners who are in schools in the past year. It's not learners in higher education. These are learners who are in schools, because that is exactly where the question was directed. Be that as it may be, let me bring in George here. I'm going to come back to you in a moment, HOD. George, sustainable management structures and strategies, are we satisfied that these are in place at all levels of basic education in various provinces to ensure that there is implementation of policy?
Good evening, Thabo, and good evening to the viewers. Thabo, asking about sustainable strategies. It is unfortunate, from where we stand as the South African Council for Educators, we do not implement those. Those are for the various provincial departments of basic education, and they are the ones to implement those. We implement the Code of Professional Ethics for teachers. That is where we come in.
No, I understand that is one of the structures. Yeah, I was still going to come back to the HOD. One of the structures that is also supposed to help us in this particular challenge is your structure, which needs to deal with the discipline of teachers who are acting unprofessionally in terms of their relations with learners.
Indeed, that is where we come in. And if you were to ask the question, are you doing enough? That would have been the question. The reason why I said this is because we are aware that the department is trying. Whether that manages what the department wishes to manage is another question. But we are aware of their efforts. We are aware that they are trying.
Yeah. From your point of view, who is responsible to lead and oversee the process of ensuring that teachers who are behaving unprofessionally are being held to account? It's being reported, cases are being opened, and this is being followed up.
Thabo, this is a tripartite thing. By that, I mean the following. Those who have to lead will be the employer, because in terms of the Employment of Educators Act, the employer has a role to play. The employer has set out processes to deal with issues of ill discipline. That doesn't take away the SAS's responsibility as a professional body. Therefore, we are in it together. When it comes to reporting, then it becomes the responsibility of those who become aware of the abuse on learners. It starts with the teachers in a school, with the learners themselves, the parent alike. So we all have a responsibility to report issues of abuse. The employer has the responsibility to deal with those reported cases of abuse in terms of the Employment of Educators Act, and or depending on who is the employer, if it is a private school or what you call independent schools or school governing bodies, they have the responsibility to implement their systems or to put their systems in place and implement those, be it a contract coupled with a code of conduct. We also have the responsibility as the professional body to deal with, investigate cases of abuse that get reported to us. So as I said, we are all in it together. We all have responsibilities alike. We don't have to wait for one another. We have to fight from all ends.
Yeah. Well, Onica, then on that score, who is responsible in the province to lead and oversee these processes? As I mentioned, that of the 11,000, only 4,000 or so actually were reported in cases were open. Who is responsible to lead and oversee the process of ensuring that the policies are adhered to? And do you have, where you're sitting right now, a report that tells you which institutions have done what?
Well, thank you very much. In terms of overseeing what has to happen, it's everybody in the department, but I must also indicate that we have a branch that specifically deals with learner pregnancy. I mean, it's a directorate within the branch that is responsible for schools, circuits, and also districts. Now, in terms of that, we implement all our policies. We implement the EEA in terms of making sure that those teachers that are found to be to have committed sexual misconducts are held accountable for that. And so far, I want to indicate that there are teachers that we have already dismissed in terms of after they were actually taken for disciplinary processes. And some of them we find guilty, and others, and when we find them guilty, we really dismiss them. But in some instances, you find that the learners and the parents who actually reported the matter later on withdraw, and you don't even have witnesses to strengthen your case. And in that regard, that is precisely where we find that we are weakened as the department, because it looks like parents sometimes and the learners agree with the perpetrators outside the disciplinary processes. Yeah. So we are responsible for that. But the policy itself suggests that there needs to be, at least in every province, a subcommittee, a structure called a subcommittee that will look at the implementation of this policy, ensuring that all levels of the basic education system in the province are implementing this policy. Do you have such a subcommittee? Well, we do have a subcommittee, and it is in place, and it oversees what actually happens in terms of the implementation of the policy. But I also want to indicate that apart from that, we have also created partnerships with other sister departments to make sure that we deal with this challenge. We have sister departments like social development and also the Department of Health. We also have partnerships with NGOs, and we really and community leaders. So we're really trying to also bring in other stakeholders to assist us, because we have come to realize that teenage pregnancy is really a societal matter. So we need to involve everybody in making sure that the policies are implemented, but also to make sure that we really prevent it.
Yeah. No, I agree that there needs to be community-based interventions, but I still want to find out what you are doing at your level. There is one of the areas of prevention. And I know you've already spoken about the impact mitigation, and that is true. We've got to make sure that learners stay in school, they continue learning, they're not discriminated against, and so on and so forth. But the first part of it talks about the fact that we do need to prevent unintended learner pregnancies in school. And one of the ways we need to prevent it is by giving age-appropriate sexual reproductive health information. So information access is one of those areas. Are we following science accurately as far as that is concerned? Right? Would you give me an exact report of the kind of information that is being given, if it's the right material that is being used, it's given at the appropriate time, and therefore you are beginning to see an improvement in terms of how that information is being given to the learners and how they're responding to it?
Well, let me just indicate that we have the Life Skills HIV and AIDS program that we implement across the system. And with regard to the Life Skills HIV and AIDS program, that is precisely where there is learners are actually taken through the sexual the sexual health program, and that is precisely what we are implementing. But also in terms of peer education, where they sit and discuss these issues in terms of making sure that they don't fall culprits to the advances of boys, and also to the advances of let me just say men. So we really have that, but also part of what we teach in the part of the curriculum is life orientation and also life skills. And within that, we also have programs that deal with teenage pregnancy.
George, in relation to...
and let me also add that we also have radio shows that we always conduct that is for advocacy.
Yes.
And yes, we do it in our province.
As far as SACE is concerned, then, George, what are you doing in terms of managing relationships between educators and learners? How are you promoting or advocating for things that need to be avoided?
It has to be known that SACE has the responsibility to see to it that the image of the profession remains intact and to ensure that, among other things, there are no relationships, improper relationships, such as sexual relationships between learners and teachers. What we do, we go out on drives. We go out to workshop educators on what is expected of them. Over and above them getting it from university, especially the new educators, we go out, we educate teachers, we remind them on what the code of conduct is expecting of them. That is what we do. We've got collaborations with teacher unions who are supporting our drive to say that there should not be improper relationships or love relationships or sexual relationships between learners and teachers. And we also have now what we want to throw in as a challenge to schools and or educators as to what they can do as schools. And if you allow me, I can go into that. Thabo, there is a slide. I don't know if you do have the slide. It's about time. If we've not been talking, it's about time we begin to talk and talk about the uncomfortable things. We talk about a whole lot of things in schools, but the question is, do we ever take the time to invite learners, both boys and girls, because these things are happening to both boys and girls? Do we ever take the time to invite them and begin to say to them or enlighten them about the relationships between teachers and learners? Do we go out as teachers or as a school to say, we want you learners to know that the following should not happen to you?
Yeah.
One, no teacher in this school should begin to flirt with a learner in a school. No teacher should send an SMS to learners and flirting with them. No teacher should groom learners sexually. No teacher should propose love relations to learners. That should be teachers telling the learners to say this is what they should not do. And that no teacher should have a love relationship. No teacher should have sexual relationships with learners. No teacher should sexually harass you as a learner and so forth. So that should be schools taking up the drive now to learners to say, if it happens, then report this to us.
Yeah, yeah.
So until we become honest, until we begin to enlighten the learners, until we begin to enlighten the parents of what we should not be doing to their children, it will not stop. But the day we say to the learners, you should hold us accountable if we do the following as I said,
Yes.
then it will stop. But we may be afraid to talk about those things because when we talk about them, for those who've been doing them, the reports might just start. So it could be a fear. But the day, Thabo, we begin to talk about these things and say, learners, this shouldn't happen. And we shouldn't talk about this once every 5 years. If we do it once every 3 months, so be it.
So do you think that there are some cultural, maybe even social practices within the boundaries of our communities that prevent that kind of meaningful, open communication between parents and children?
We are past the cultural barriers, Thabo. We are at a stage where we have to talk. We now talk. There's so much information out there. There's nothing to hide. There's nothing to fear. The only sad thing is, in some corners we like to say to learners, this is taboo. This shouldn't be talked of. We are past this. These learners know everything, young as they are. Therefore, we're going to put the cultural barriers aside and just be open with these learners. That's why I called it an uncomfortable topic. We ought to popularize it.
HOD, as we wrap up, what have you put in place as early warning systems? Policy saying part of the strategy for management and prevention of learner pregnancy is to develop early warning systems, particularly in schools that you identify as high-risk schools.
Well, in terms of making sure that we implement the early warning systems, what we have done is that we have actually put in place advocacy programs that we take to these schools, but also we have the boys education movement that we have also established, as well as the girl education movement, where we actually assist these learners to really deal with teenage pregnancy, to make sure that we prevent it even before it happens. So these are some of the things that we have done as the department, but also we have also appointed officials that support our schools in terms of life skills, HIV and AIDS. And these are actually paid through the grant that we have, that is the Life Skills HIV and AIDS grant. So we have these learner support agencies in the province that we have appointed that move from one school to the other, making sure that they provide support to all our learners and also our teachers in our schools. And that to us is actually working wonders because we are able to deal with the early warning systems that we're talking about here. Because they are able to indicate to the learners what they can and cannot do in terms of making sure that they don't fall prey to teenage pregnancy.
I appreciate you all, and thank you very much for coming on and helping us in this conversation tonight. George Moroasui is with SACE, as well as Onica Dederen from the Limpopo Education Head of Department.